The moment I became a big Robert G fan, there was a little bit of drama regarding a spot on the St. Lawrence River, and you were contending for the lead, and you caught a 6-pounder with some other gentlemen around you. And after you get done the trademark Robert G belly rub, you start chanting USA. And I thought that was the most badass thing I'd ever seen. And I'm like, I love this dude. I don't know him, but I freaking love him.
Yeah. I was kind of fired up in the moment. I probably shouldn't have done that, but you know how it goes.
Well, dude, I feel like everybody was pretty fired up in the moment, and everybody's men, and everybody got over it, and like it's not some big deal now.
Yeah.
But no, I thought that was absolutely wicked. So that's when I become a Robert G fan, is when he started chanting USA.
Yeah, you could take it to the bank. Hold the line. Hey, you know we on the way all the time. Yeah, we do this every day.
Ladies and gentlemen, sports fans, children of all ages, got the man, Elite Series angler, Mr. Robert G. Caught him on the road to the first Elite event. Let's give him a round of applause here. I got all these cool new buttons on this podcasting website, so it.
Thank you.
So Robert and I, barely know each other. We've talked on the phone about 2 times, but really quickly, I'm going to tell you when I became a Robert G fan. So obviously was impressed by his angling abilities when you step out on the opens in the EQs, fishes 9 of them and finished second or third, fourth in points, something like that.
Fourth in points, yeah.
Yeah. Then he goes to the Elite Series and just automatically starts catching them. Like, first couple of events might not have been perfect, but now when he hit the summer, really hit his stride. And the moment I became a big Robert G fan, there was a little bit of drama regarding a spot on the St. Lawrence River, and you were contending for the lead, and you caught a 6-pounder with some other gentlemen around you. And after you get done the trademark Robert G belly rub, you start chanting USA. And I thought that was the most badass thing I'd ever seen. And I'm like, I love this dude. I don't know him, but I freaking love him.
Yeah. I was kind of fired up in the moment. I probably shouldn't have done that, but you know how it goes.
Well, dude, I feel like everybody was pretty fired up in the moment, and everybody's men, and everybody got over it, and like it's not some big deal now.
Yeah.
But no, I thought that was absolutely wicked. So that's when I become a Robert G fan, is when he started chanting USA. So we are. I thought it was pretty cool. You're a Knoxville, Tennessee native. Go Vols.
Yes. Go Vols.
Go Vols. I'm a big Tennessee fan myself. So when I started looking for people that know a lot about, that East Tennessee Highland Reservoir type stuff, Rob being at the top of his game right now, killing it on the Elite Series was my very first call. So we're going to talk about Highland Reservoirs in March. Let's just dive off into it. So if you're a guy from Florida, or if you're a guy from Georgia or Texas or something that has never seen a Highland Reservoir, kind of name me some Highland Reservoirs and then tell me what you think makes a Highland.
So when I hear Highland Reservoir, first couple that come to mind to me are Norris Lake, which is up near me. It's the closest quote unquote Highland Reservoir that I think of immediately when you say that. So Norris Lake in East Tennessee, Dale Hollow Lake in Middle Tennessee, Center Hill, Cumberland, Lake Cumberland in Kentucky. Those are the 4 that come to mind as soon as you say that. There's some other ones too that I fish. There's one called Fontana. It's in western North Carolina. It's a Highland Reservoir as well. So those 5 right there, those are what I think of when I hear Highland Reservoir.
So when we describe one, they're always in hill country, like they're never in flat ground. They're super deep, usually super clear. What else do you think makes a Highland Reservoir?
A lot of bluff walls, Fontana and Norris, for example, they're kind of up in the mountains near the Smoky Mountains, right? So it's pretty much the lake is a gorge that they put that dam up. It's a really, really, really tall dam, and it's probably, over 200 foot deep down near the dam. So that's what, whenever I think Highland Reservoir, that's what comes to mind right there. It's just how deep it is at the dam.
And water's usually pretty clear,
Very clear. Yeah.
Can have some vegetation, but I don't think that's really the norm. Most of it's rocks and natural type stuff. Versus
it can have vegetation. Like Dale Hollow, it's got some grass in it, but
it does.
It's kind of its own thing. It's just a great lake.
So again, we're a guy that's never been on a Highland Reservoir. Let's take Norris or Dale Hollow. There's a ton of BFLs coming up on Dale Hollow. When you get to a lake and you drop your boat in, what is the one thing, like the very first thing that you look at? Is it water clarity in March? Is it water clarity? Is it water color? Is it temperature? Really, what are you looking for? What's the first thing that's going to help you start your search?
Yeah, so whenever I dump my boat in, I first look at the water clarity and the water temperature. First two things for sure, especially in March, because I want to know if it's the water's still cold, like wintertime kind of mode, or whether they're pulling up to start staging for pre-spawn. And that's kind of how I go about it is I usually, earlier March, I kind of start off on the lower end, the big water, I guess you would say, the deeper water. And I like to catch those fish that are still out there, like on points and
bait eaters
in drains. Yeah. So that's what I'm looking at for at the first couple weeks of March. And then weather depending, things could warm up or we could get a bunch of rain, and that's when things change for me.
So anytime I go to a new lake that I've never been to, I try my best to write off as much of it as I can. To me, knowing where not to go fish is just as important as knowing where to go fish. So can you pretty much eliminate, again, guy knows nothing about it, can you pretty much eliminate way up in the river and way in the back of the creeks and that kind of thing in March?
I eliminate, the very back end of the creeks, unless there's a big rain. That's my rule of thumb. You know what I mean? Because if that happens, you might want to go check that out. If the water's clear, back to what we were saying, if the water's clean and clear, I don't ever go to the backs of the creeks, ever.
Okay. So,
and that's eliminated from, if I see that water and I can see the boat ramp falling off to the rocks, I don't even think about going in the backs of the creeks or going up the river that day.
Perfect. So we're going to start towards the lower end. Do you look at main lakes, or do you look, halfway back in the creeks, or kind of where do you want to start your search?
So I usually start my search from, I'm kind of backwards from some people. Some people start shallow, then go deep. I start the very deepest possible. I start my search at the deepest place you could catch a bass and go up shallower from there. Because I feel like if I could kind of get a feel of where they're at in that really deep depths, that I can follow them all the way up to the spawn.
Okay. So I'm assuming that's like main lake points and bluffs and that kind of thing?
Main lake points and, drain. I'm a big drain guy, you hear that a lot from guys in like South Carolina and like herring guys, but that's a big thing on Highland Reservoirs too. It's not herring, but it's threadfin. Those threadfin get real pent up in these drains, and it's similar to the herring deal. Like you can go there in the morning time and there'll be several 20, 30 fish schools in bait. So that's what I try to find early March for sure.
So you're looking, and March is kind of a transition time. By the end of March, a lot of times fish are doing different things than the first, and we'll get into that in just a second. But kind of in the beginning of March, so you're looking at fish on bait. So how do you start your process to go find those?
So I'm a big proponent of 2D sonar. I think that's one of the biggest things you can have, biggest tools you can have on a Highland Reservoir lake. Because, I mean, you can be running around at 40 miles per hour and see bait on your 2D. So that's one huge thing that I always pay attention to. I mean, I do scan the drains that look good and everything like that and all the points that look good. But, like, if I see bait on my 2D, I turn around and inspect that area. That's kind of how I just go about it. No rhyme or reason, no contour. If there's bait around, I give it a good look around or a good pass with my side scan to just see what's going on.
So when you're scanning, so we're running around at 30 miles an hour and we're in 150 foot of water, 120, 80 foot of water, ever how deep we are. We're running around through there at 35 or 40. A lot of people don't know that you can do that. Like, you can cover so much water with 2D sonar. Like, it's really overlooked.
Oh yeah. Like, I mean, and on these lakes, there's small pockets, and, like, I wouldn't necessarily call them creeks, but they're kind of like I would call them a holler. You know what I mean?
Pocket.
So it's like,
exactly.
Yeah, it's like a creek. It's like a half creek, half pocket. You know what I mean? It's kind of skinny and long. I'll just take right down the middle of them and just run 30 miles per hour, almost like halfway back or 3/4 of the way back, and turn around and go out. And if I see bait, I'll either mark it a waypoint where I see that bait on my 2D, or if I don't see any, I just go to the next one.
It's all about efficiency. Anytime I feel like we're fishing tournaments, and people don't realize that, like, efficiency is one of the key things that guys at the top of their game, they're always super efficient. All right. So we went to the lower end of the lake. We've graphed over some points and not seen any bait. We've started running these holler pockets. That's a good Tennessee term.
Yeah, and I will say, on the points, if the water's still cold, if I see some good looking boulders on my side scan, I'll make a mark and fish around them too.
Okay, so even if you don't see bait or anything there,
even if I don't see bait, I'll keep it honest. If there's some just nice, good-looking big boulder rocks, kind of like you would fish in up north for smallmouth, you know what I mean? Because a lot of these Highland reservoirs are smallmouth and spotted bass, so they like those kind of things.
For sure. So the cool thing, in my opinion, about Highlands, and being from right here in Tennessee, I grew up Dale Hollow, Center Hill, those type lakes, so I've got quite a bit of experience, is you can literally win with almost all three species. Maybe not spots, but for sure largemouth and smallmouth, if you can weigh them in, if there's not a big slot limit, something like that, like Dale Hollow.
For sure. Yeah, that's my favorite thing about Tennessee, and Middle Tennessee, East Tennessee, and Western North Carolina, this area, and North Georgia, this area of the country, of the diversity of species of bass you can catch and win tournaments with. I really love it.
Yeah, I weighed in an ABA one time, and I weighed in 4 species. I had a largemouth, 2 smallmouth, a spot, and a meanmouth. It was one of the coolest mags I've ever had. That's what I call
the Grand Slam.
Yeah. Yeah, it was super cool.
The Grand Slam right there. That's the Tennessee Grand Slam.
That was on Center Hill.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, there's not a lot of places with meanmouth, and I'd say Tennessee is I feel like I really think they should consider a meanmouth as the Tennessee bass.
Yeah, don't worry about those big smallmouth.
I mean,
so we're going to pull up
in all the lakes.
Very true. So I'm going to pull up a map right here, and we're on Norris, which is one of your home lakes. Is what I've got pulled up here. Give me just a second. Sharing this screen. Okay. So we are at the Norris Lake Dam, and Norris is one of the cooler lakes I've ever looked at. I've never been on it personally, but like it's got a bunch of different stuff on it.
Yeah, it's basically 3 lakes in one.
For sure, all kind of connected to a river. So if we're listening to Robert G on the podcast here, we're going to start down here at the dam at some of these bigger creek arms. So what exactly are you looking for here on the map to make you start, running in these little holler pockets and that kind of thing to find bait to start off with here in March?
So if you zoom in, see that writing right there? I can't read it because I'm driving, but there's like 4 letters right there on the left-hand side of the screen.
Right here?
I can't. Yeah, right. See that holler pocket right there? Like visually to me, that just pops out. Like I'm definitely going to run into that. And
Gotcha.
see the 3 pockets to the right across the river or the lake from that?
Mm-hmm.
To me, that just sticks out to me that there's going to be a point around there because it looks like there's 3 creeks running into the lake all at once. So there could be some point and some bait activity because of the running water running into there.
Okay. So you're going to start by looking at your 2D and just running around. And you may have to run, are you stopping when you get about halfway back in these creeks? Is kind of where you're stopping and running to the next creek?
Yeah, in the long, skinnier, like, the holler creeks, but those little shorter ones, I'll scan around them points and, off the ends of them.
Gotcha. And then you're just looking for big boulders, pieces of cover versus pieces of structure, right? Gotcha. Okay. So we found some bait now. We found some bait, we found some boulders, that kind of thing. In my opinion, forward-facing sonar has changed the Highland Reservoir game as much as it's changed anywhere in the country. Like it's
Without
so
a
hard
doubt.
to win without, putting your flat bill cap on and staring at your cheater box. So we found some bait, we found some boulders. What are we doing now?
We're dropping the scope down and taking a look at what we're doing.
Okay. And you're looking for fish, or will those fish be stuck to the bottom? And are you looking for fish suspended around bait, or are you looking for rocks you can drop a minnow or a drop shot or something like that on?
Yep.
So you're checking everything that's right there that's around those big schools of bait.
For sure. I mean, most of the time they'll be around the bait, suspended most of the time if you're in the middle of those holler creeks. But if you're on them points, you don't necessarily have to have bait around for you to be living on the cover, right? And you probably won't even see them sometimes on your 2D. So you kind of have to fish around more and cast at all the high percentage looking casts.
Yeah, I personally, I've noticed that schools of fish, even in the summertime, are kind of hard to graph on Highland Reservoirs.
For sure.
Because there's so many rocks there, they get sucked down to them so tight that you can't see the fish like you can on a Kentucky lake on softer bottom or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a lot harder to scan and find schools like on side scan. To me, when I'm scanning, I'll try to find, something that sticks out, like whether it be like a massive tree or several boulders that are isolated on a point, or a hard spot that kind of looks like just kind of like stuff like that is what I will mark and then turn around and fish. Used to, I would mark that and, but now with forward facing, you can fish it a lot more efficiently and make the high percentage cast. And that's kind of how you have to run your patterns on a Highland Reservoir, because all the Highland Reservoirs they're pretty big and vast because of how deep the water is. So you kind of have to, in my brain, being a tournament angler, is I'm always on the go and trying to cover water as efficiently as possible. So that's kind of where I go.
No, that makes a ton of sense. Now, you brought up something there. To me, you get on a lake like Center Hill, Del Hollow is not hardly as bad, but especially a lake like Center Hill, everything looks the same. Like there's very few times that you find gravel versus rock. It's just all pretty sheer bluffs. So how do you try to make a call on where to, where to look on some of this stuff? Are you looking for some transitions or where gravel comes out, or are you looking for bigger rocks, bluff wall? What are you looking for from a cover standpoint?
Yeah, that's another thing that's a good point right there. Is like on Norris and a lot of the East Tennessee, and there is some a little bit, not as much on Center Hill. It kind of all does look the same, but any sort of rock transition, like some of these lakes where it's harder to tell the transition, you have to go by the size of the rock, where it's big, huge, massive boulder looking rocks, and it goes down to basketball size rocks. That's a transition. Whereas
Gotcha.
some of the lakes in East Tennessee is like it's clay to rock. And like that's usually the juice for smallmouth is when you find that clay. Like this time of year, those smallmouth love using that clay near rock. That good mixture of clay and rock. I mean, that's just muy bien. That's the juice.
That's like a Chick-fil-A sandwich.
That is.
Yeah, I don't feel like clay gets talked about enough on Highland Reservoirs. Like
Yeah.
clay is a deal.
Is a huge deal especially for smallmouth. I mean, like recently it's been super cold where we live, and this doesn't have anything to do with March because usually it ain't as cold as it has been in March. But that's what these bass were really, they feel like clay warms up a little bit faster in the cold water when it's sunnier. So in the the colder water, they like just laying their bellies on that clay because it's a little bit warmer.
Yeah, I've actually caught largemouth and spots when their bellies were orange or reddish looking because they've been sucked to it for so long they literally turned the color of it.
And that's where the crawfish get too, because it's warmer for them as well. So it makes a lot of sense.
Okay, if our drains don't work, give us kind of a secondary pattern that, like, if we've looked at, let's say 10 of those and we've either found some bait and couldn't find any fish around them or couldn't find much bait, where else are you looking? Kind of give me a secondary deal to go look.
That transition from either the clay to rock transition areas like that, or I try to find a particular pattern fishing up shallower near the bank based on the structure on the bank. Like we were talking about how there's some where it's like big jaggedy looking rocks, or whether it's riprap size looking rocks or pebble, nice little pebble skipping stone rocks or clay, that kind of deal. Like that's the next pattern you gonna have to find is like what they're on that day based on those because that's what you're kind of given. I mean, there's not this time of year in March, there's not many laydowns in the water because usually the lakes and reservoirs fluctuate so many, or at least around me, like they fluctuate so much. Well, a lot of the laydowns aren't in the water, so you can't go and skip or flip a jig and lay downs all day because there's just not that many.
Right. No. So let's talk just a little bit about drawdowns from somebody that may be coming from a natural lake up north or something like that. Like in this area, drawdowns are a huge thing in the wintertime, and a lot of times they won't fill back up until April or May.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about that and what the lake looks like from summer pool to winter pool.
Yeah, so basically kind of what I was saying is there's a lot less wood in the water, and if the wood that is in the water, it's either like man put out like brush piles or wood that's floated up into the bank after they took the lake back down. So there's not much wood cover near the bank as much. So it's basically all rock or just anything related to the bank, if that makes sense. The structure on the bank.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of these lakes will go down, like, what does Cherokee come down, like 10 feet or something?
Yeah.
I
I
mean,
think 15
yeah,
or
10,
18.
yeah, so they fluctuate tremendously. So if you look at it in, if you go pre-practice in February and then don't get back there to April, like you may be looking at a completely different lake that's got a lot more places for fish to hide.
Yeah,
So
and
always keep in mind
Douglas is
your
also
lake
a
level.
good. Douglas next to Cherokee, it fluctuates a whole bunch.
And Dale Hollow fluctuates 8 or 10 feet. All those lakes do.
Yeah, and like those other lakes like Norris and Fontana, they'll fluctuate. I don't know the exact number, but Fontana, I feel like it's over 20 feet, and Norris, it can be pretty like a pretty good fluctuation. You know what I mean? I need to do my research and get the exact number, but it's a
No,
lot different in the summertime than in the wintertime, or in the spring too.
right. Well, I mean, still in March here, most of the dam operators, they're keeping those lakes lower because we're going to get some big rains. So what is one thing that can change fish the fastest condition wise in March? What do you think makes them leave you or come to you faster than anything else?
Exactly what you were saying is the big rains. That's when everything starts to change on the Highland Reservoir. Or, I feel like you can get beat doing what we were talking about earlier on a Highland Reservoir when them rains start happening. And that's when, you start running in the backs of the creeks and looking for flowing water, or running away up the river and finding that good muddy water. Like, it's a good thing sometimes on Highland Reservoir to be fishing the muddiest part of the lake, in my opinion.
No,
I've had great success throwing a square bill or a flat side in a foot of water, and you can't even see your bait whenever you put it in the water on like a Norris or Cherokee or Fontana. Like, that's just a thing in the spring like that. Like, get your red crankbait out, and you can have some great big bags doing that.
yeah, you really can. And especially for guys that either don't like scoping or don't have a scope or whatever, you can run up these rivers. To me, that's kind of a third pattern. If you've had some rain. Now, if it's not rained in 3 weeks, then you're probably not going to have very much dirty water. And I feel like you've got to have dirty water for that.
Exactly. Like, used to, like before scope was a thing, that was one of my favorite patterns to run, was going and searching out the dirtier water on Highland Reservoirs. It's like that. I felt like the biggest largemouth in the lake I could catch was doing that. And ultimately, if you catch all largemouth on a Highland Reservoir, you're probably going to win.
Definitely going to have a chance. So, Rob, if I blindfolded you and said, okay, we are going in East Tennessee on a Highland Reservoir, you're completely blindfolded. Give me 5 combos and your top 5 baits that you're going to always have on the deck of your boat in March. We'll leave it as number 6. How about that?
Okay. All right. Yeah. So 2 spinning rods for sure. I'm going to have a jig head minnow, or Damiki rig, as we've always called it. A
Right.
Damiki rig for sure, especially for early part of March. And then
Okay.
a shaky head.
All right.
with
Tell
a
me your
small-
setup. Tell me your setup on both of those.
It's really about the same exact setup. A 6'10", 7-foot medium action rod with a 10-pound braid to 8-pound leader.
And as far as the minnows you're throwing, are you throwing tungsten heads or?
Yeah, I like a tungsten.
Gotcha. Shaky head worm, what are you using?
I like a Bloom's finesse worm,
That's just,
especially on Highland Reservoirs. So, if it's real clear, you want that smaller profile. It doesn't spook them as much. But I've caught I used to catch a lot of fish, just going down bluffs and going down the bank with the shaky head this time, especially if it wasn't that very windy, if it's kind of slick, that's like the bait to throw.
green pumpkin, or you got a sneaky color that nobody knows about?
Yeah, like I like a watermelon candy. That's the one I usually throw, is that watermelon candy, because it doesn't really look like a watermelon worm. It's more of like a green pumpkin looking with that blue and purple flake, and I just really, that's my go-to. But then like a baby bass is also a really good option for Highland Reservoir as well. Those are my two favorites for Highland Reservoir.
Gotcha. So we've got an Alabama rig if it's legal. We've got a minnow, as we call them here in Tennessee. We got a shaky head. Give me your other three.
Just I usually have about 3 different crankbaits. You know what I mean? Like, I have them depending on depth, right? Because you don't know which one but I would say just generic, a shallow crankbait, something from 10 foot or less style crankbait on a 7 foot medium glass rod. I like to throw a glass rod on my March time, like, pre-spawn cranking. I like to throw a glass and a 10-pound line.
Okay. What's your favorite couple of crankbaits that you're going to have?
Like the Bill Lewis MR6 or the Rapala DT6. A rock crawler is another great one I love. And then just flat sides, anything like a Pro Little John or there's a lot of custom, like handmade flat sides, but another good one for if you're running up the rivers when it's real muddy is that Jackal Bling. It's a really great one. Thrown up shallow in that muddy water because it's got a little tick to it and they can find it a little bit easier.
So in the crankbaits, are you using a little bit more brighter color, like a spring crawl or a red crawl, Rayburn red, something like that?
Depending on water clarity, if the water is more cleaner, I don't like a red crankbait. I like more of a brown with a little red tint to it. Kind of like more just natural look. I guess one that comes to mind would be take a Rapala DT6, and we're going to base the colors off that. Take a mule colored Rapala, then go to the brown crawdad when it's a little bit more stained, and then go to the, like a demon when it's real muddy. You know what I mean? That's kind of my 3 I go from. That more natural when it's cleaner. Then if it's a little stained, that brown crawdad because it's got that bright red orange belly, and then real bright when it's real muddy.
Yeah. No, that DT6 is an amazing bait. It's amazing. I've done 3 or 4 of these podcasts talking about the month of March with people from a Tennessee River down in South Carolina, and now we're talking about East Tennessee. And a DT6 and a DT10 have been mentioned by every single person. Like, that's just a dang good bait. Exactly. So 3 crankbaits, a minnow, and a shaky head.
I was just saying that crankbait is one of my rods.
Okay, got you. So we still got 2 more.
Yeah. Then I go with a spinnerbait.
Going old school on us.
Yeah, spinnerbait and a jig is my last one. So a spinnerbait, I throw like a 7.2 medium heavy or a 7 foot or 6 foot. Or I usually throw a longer rod on a Highland Reservoir just so I can make a longer cast, right? And usually I try to get away with the lightest line I can, like a 14-pound line or 12-pound line.
On your spinnerbait?
12, 14, 15-pound line. Because most of the time when I'm throwing a spinnerbait on a Highland Reservoir in March, like I said, I usually am more in the cleaner water. I like it's a little bit more hidden, that 14, 15 pound is not as big and has less drag, and you can get it a little deeper. So because I'm fishing it a little bit deeper. You know what I'm saying?
So what conditions come up that make you automatically. Well, let's go. I guess we got our jig there. So, what conditions make you want to pick up a spinnerbait over a crankbait?
Whenever the wind is absolutely getting it, and I can't scope because I'll just get blown around, and my crankbait will get flung into the trees. That's when it's spinnerbait and Alabama rig time, and that when you get on that on a Highland Reservoir, that's the most fun bite ever because they hit it with some authority, and it feels like they're cutting your line.
It's there's nothing any better than a spinnerbait bite when you make like 3 cranks and there's nothing there.
Exactly. That's the best bite there is, in my opinion.
And you're going to throw those on those transitions that we talked about?
Yeah.
Or that muddy or clay to gravel to softball size rock, that kind of thing.
Exactly. And at channel swings, I pay attention to where the channel swings and if it's a little flat or stuff like that too.
Okay. Gotcha. So when we go to our bigger line, our bait cast and stuff, our crankbaits, our jig and that kind of thing. So are you trying to ease up the lake a little bit more, or will you do that still on that lower end, just more in the backs of stuff?
Yeah, like with the spinnerbait, if the wind is really getting it, like I was saying, I'll keep it main lake in the clearest part of the lake because I've caught some really big giant ones, on a spinnerbait across a point or something like that in the clear, like you can see your blades turning and then they just disappear, but it's the wind is just breaking that surface and they're just in a feeding mood. So another bait I do want to add is a great bait also is a mag draft, like a 6-inch style, like a Kitech, like that kind of bait too is unbelievable. I probably should have said that over a jig because I like to cover water more when I'm on a Highland Reservoir.
A mag draft to me is as good of a swim bait as there is out there. Like they just freaking get bit.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much that's all on a Highland Reservoir. I'll either throw a mag draft or a Kitech, like a 4.8 or a 5.8 with like a line through Kitech.
Okay. Do you use like a coffee straw to make the line through, or how do you do that with the Kitech?
I do that if I'm fishing in rivers up shallow, but they've got these things that's kind of like a coffee straw, but it's weighted. So it kills them and gets them down a little bit deeper.
Gotcha. Where does a man get those?
I got them off Tackle Warehouse and, just some of the retailers. I forgot the name of them, but they're kind of like a bronze or like a brass looking straw, but they're weighted.
Okay, so almost like a rivet, like a long rivet type deal.
Yep. I mean, it's great. It's a great alternative to a mag draft.
Tell me about your rod setup when you're throwing a mag draft.
So on a Highland Reservoir like that, it's same 7.2, 7.3, or 5, depending on how far you want to cast it, and just 15-pound line. I have thrown 12, but I don't. You better be fishing not near like some big rocks, but you can get away with 12 in certain areas.
Gotcha.
And depending on how deep you want it to go, that's when I threw 12. Is like I knew they wouldn't get me in somewhere they could break me off, and I wanted it to get it a little bit deeper on some like steeper stuff,
No, I know exactly what you're talking about. Dude, I think those are I mean, we said 5 and I think we're at 7. Like, the A-rig's kind of an alternate there because you can't throw it everywhere, but like you've got to have it on early in the year in this part of the country. I mean, it catches big ones and catches a lot of them.
Yeah, I don't get to throw it anymore, so that's why I just like thinking about it because it was so fun used to. But now my alternative is a spinnerbait, to A-rig.
Okay. When you see people that are not from here, they talk different. They got a little bit different accent than you and I do. When they come to a Highland and you're fishing against them, what's the biggest mistakes that you see people made? What do they get suckered into that, years of experience has taught you that, hey, I can't get suckered into this?
A big mistake I see a lot of them is they try to force like, oh, I'm going to go catch largemouth. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to go figure out how to catch the largemouth on these Highland Reservoirs up in the backs of the creeks. And like, they'll go and practice and they'll catch a few, but little do they know those are the only ones in the entire back of that creek. You know what I mean? So they just get burned and they go and run all these pockets they've got a bite or two in, and there's just none left. And I feel like when the water's clear like that, that's a big thing that happens to a lot of people.
No, I see that too. I'll tell you one
It's like they're
that
afraid of finesse fishing.
right. Yeah, I tell you something else that people get messed up on, especially here in Tennessee, is on every lake besides Dale Hollow, the smallmouth limit is 8. So you've got to go catch good smallmouth to bring them back to weigh in. Like 17 inchers, 2.5, 3 pounders, 3.5 pounders. You can be sucked into those pretty quickly too. And a lot of times you'll catch a bunch of 17 inchers and won't ever have a keeper.
Oh yeah. That's another thing. Like, yeah, man, I got on a great cranking bite where I caught like 20 smallmouth, and they thought they were good ones because they weighed them instead of measured them, and they weighed, near 3 pounds. And like on Norris, that's a great fish, like a near 3 pounders, one you want to weigh in, but they didn't measure them. So they're in the part of the lake where they just aren't 18 inches. And that's a big thing around me, is like finding that area of the lake where most than not is they're 18 plus instead of 16 or 17, because those 16 and 17 often times they weigh more than the 18 inchers. I don't know how it works, but it just happens. And it's happened to me a whole bunch growing up here. It's literally every lake I fish in East Tennessee is 18 inches, except for Cherokee and South Holston, where they're 15 inches. But I think they've changed a few rules now that I've been going fishing. I think Douglas, you can keep a 15 incher now too. I don't know, but
yeah, make sure you check your local regulations before you get to that place. Like Dale Hollow, for instance, where there's a ton of BFLs. Like Dale Hollow is a great tournament lake. It's got 1 million fish in it. That slot limit is 16 to 21, and you can keep one under 16 and one over 21. A buddy of mine caught one in a BFL last year that weighed 5'8" and was 20 7/8 inches long.
Yeah, I don't even try to fish for smallmouth when I got a.
You can't. You can only keep 2, one little one, one big one, and you will reel in 4-pound smallmouth and chunk them behind the boat like they're a 10-inch spot.
Yeah, that lake will piss you off bad in a tournament.
It's like so good.
It's bad. It like that. It's about like Chickamauga too. I mean, Chickamauga, you can only keep one over 18, so it's kind of not the same. But Dale Hollow, that slot limit's terrible, because you literally will catch 21 pounds of smallmouth and not even have a keeper.
Yeah. And it was amazing last year when the BPT guys went there. I was talking to some of them before, about the time they announced the schedule. I'm like, they're going to show everybody how good a fishery Dale Hollow truly is, because half the 2/3 of the smallmouth there, because they could weigh them, and they had some Mondo bags of just brown ones that probably you or I couldn't weigh them in.
They would have never been able to weigh them in.
So as far as navigating on, that's always another question that I always try to figure out when I'm going to a new place, is how are these lakes to run? And the best part about a Highland Reservoir is you can run damn near anywhere you want to.
Yeah, that's why I love them. Because I don't have to worry about staying in a boat lane or staying in the main river channel or hitting a tree or anything like that. The one thing you do have to worry about, though, is on the drawdowns, is either running some of these points or cutting through like a saddle, in between an island and the bank. Like in the wintertime, that can mess you up bad. Like I have seen some bad boat wreck pictures and know people that have hit stuff that they didn't know the lake level. So check your lake level and know like where those caution areas are, because they can mess you up worse than any of those trees or anything like that on them hazardous lakes can. But besides that, you're fine to just run anywhere you want.
Yeah. Yeah, they're super easy. Even backs in the backs of creeks, most time it's 20 or 30 feet deep till you get almost to the bank everywhere. So that really easy to go run. Just like you said, pay attention. Guys, always run your maps. Like, I can't tell you how many times a map has kept me from getting in bad trouble. Let's talk about...
I mean, there are some underwater islands that are occasional on some of these places that in the wintertime will be a foot under the surface, and it'll be straight just rocks. So that can mess you up bad.
Yes, sir. Okay, so we've got our kind of our points and our drains, offshore type bait chaser deal. We've got our clay banks and gravel points, that kind of thing. Let's talk about as it gets a little bit later on in March. Kind of give me a sneaky deal that a lot of people usually miss.
One that I like to, this, I probably shouldn't even be talking about it, but
you can take it to the bank. That's our podcast name. Take it to the bank. This is good stuff.
There's a lot of, on a lot of these lakes, people overlook like little sticks or stumps on the sides of a point or on a good bank leading into where they would spawn. You know what I mean? And that's like a good little staging spot. And if you have enough of them, I mean, you could catch a really big bag of all species that are hanging around on these stumps or little irregularities like that.
So, and it's kind of like a brush pile, the only brush pile on a bank. Like, it's going to be good because that's the only cover. Well, especially in March when all these things are pulled down for the exact same reason. It's the only cover there.
Or if it's one rock, you know what I mean? Like that's kind of stuff I like to do.
The real isolated stuff.
Yeah, the isolated. Because, I mean, it is very isolated on some of these places.
And I think we've gave people a really good idea.
I don't even know how else I guess marinas is another thing, but that's not really a deal that time of year as much, to me at least.
Right. No, I agree. The only thing we really haven't talked about is bluffs.
Yeah.
Sheer up and down bluffs, especially if you can find anything with like ledges coming off of them, underwater, that kind of thing.
Yeah, like the stair step.
Yeah, but dude, other than that,
I've been burned a lot by them, but you can also catch them good on it.
They do seem to move on you pretty quickly on stuff like that.
Yeah, for sure.
Dude, I think we've gave everybody a really good picture on where to go. I feel like if you come watch this podcast, you can figure out where you need to go in the early pre-spawn. Really quickly, when do these fish usually spawn? Like, if we're talking about catching them in early March, when you're getting towards the end of March, is that when a lot of these fish are going shallow?
Towards the end of March, I usually, like, whenever I start bed fishing, will be in April. Like, that's usually when fishing it gets insane, is that last week of March to the first week of April is when they're in full-blown pre-spawn. They're about to spawn, and some are already spawning depending on the moon. So that's usually, and the days are getting longer. That's usually kind of the prime time, in my opinion. Because I feel like, I mean, if the water heats up in March, earlier March, to above 60 or whatever, the days still aren't long enough for a big wave to push up and spawn, to me, just from what I've seen. But that last week of March and first week of April, like, that's the best time of the year to go bass fishing, it to me.
Now, where are these fish just spawning in the backs of these little holler pockets and that kind of thing?
And I mean, the biggest ones I've seen spawning on the tiniest little main lake pocket, you know what I mean? That's just like really deep. And then you get to the back, and like in the back half of it, there'll just be one spawning, and it'll be like a 5-pounder and a 3.5-pound male with it. And it's just like, holy crap. But there's none else in the whole pocket. So I don't know. I just kind of put my troll motor on high and go looking. But usually that's where I find the biggest ones.
Is in little short main lake, small pockets. I feel like a lot of people overlook that.
Yeah, I feel like that's probably why.
So what is a good bag? Again, it changes depending on lakes. Dale Hollow with the smallmouth limit being a little different. But me, somewhere it's going to take 20 plus on just about any Highland Reservoir in March most of the time to win, unless conditions are just absolutely horrible. Somewhere in that
on Center
19 to
Hill and Dale
23 win.
Hollow.
Yeah.
I feel like, I guess Norris, it's a little bit, the fish aren't as big. So it would be 17 to 19 would be, that's where I feel like I would be pretty comfortable with having that bag. 20 pounds is you got to have a huge, large.
What, as far as getting paid on the tournament lakes, the Cherokees, the Douglases, the Dale Hollows that a lot of these guys are going to, that 15, 16 pound range probably going to get you paid most of the time.
Oh, shoot, yeah. Except Dale Hollow, I feel like you might need to have a little bit bigger. In my opinion, it's a little bit more stout. It's stouter than all these other ones we're talking about.
Well,
but
it
like
also
at Center Hill and Norris and Cherokee, if you have 15, 16 pounds, you're going to get paid, in my opinion, for sure.
Yeah. And Dale Hollow's a little different. Again, it's got some grass in it.
Yeah.
It's got giant largemouth in it, and a lot of them, so it's kind of its own deal.
I mean, Center Hill's got a lot of largemouth too, comparatively to like a Norris. Like Norris is more smallmouth predominant. So
Gotcha.
There are big largemouth, but you don't see like many people weigh in 5 fish of all largemouth kind of deal.
Now, do you ever slide up east of you and go to like Soho or Watauga or any of those up there?
I don't. I've been there just a handful of times. It's about, I'd say 2.5 hours from where I live. So I would rather not have to drive through downtown Knoxville to get to a lake and go west of me, just over the mountain, a lot less traffic. So I go to like Fontana. It's a great lake. It's got all 3 species of spots, like Alabama spots, smallmouth and largemouth.
We filmed a TV show on Watauga a couple of years ago, and it was this time of year, and it was freaking phenomenal. I mean,
my buddy Cole
ones.
Sands, he's a guide up there now, and they're cracking them. And I've heard all kinds of stories of 6-pound smallmouth and 8-pound largemouth, and even 10-pound largemouth. I really need to go up there more, but like I said, it's kind of a haul.
Yeah. Dude, where can people find you on socials if they want to check you out?
Yeah, on socials, my Instagram and I think YouTube and everything is GEE Fishing. And then my Facebook's just Robert G.
That is awesome. Well, guys, check him out. This dude has taken the fishing world by storm. Got one of the coolest hats. I've got to get me one of these Wookiee hats. There with
the Ewok.
The
Ewok
Ewok
hat.
Yeah. I'm not as up on my Star Wars as I should be, I guess. But I got to get me an Ewok hat.
I wasn't really either. I wasn't a huge Star Wars fan before that all happened, but I got called an Ewok, so I just ran with it.
There you go. Well, guys, great podcast right here on fishing on Highland Reservoirs. You can take it to the bank, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank y'all.
Yeah, you can take it to the bank. Hold the line. Hey, we on the way all the time. Yeah.